Welcome to our fireside chat with Michael Bunting and Lucienne Fabien. We're very excited for this conversation today. And I'm just going to start with, I'll introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jackie Roberge. I'm a partner at Mindsmatter, a coach and mindfulness-based facilitator. And I am going to be facilitating the meeting. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We encourage this to be a discussion between Lucienne and Michael, but between everyone as well. So we'd love to hear from you. Ça va être en anglais aujourd'hui, évidemment, avec Michael, mais vous pouvez aussi poser des questions en français dans le chat si vous voulez. And we are going to save a little time at the end as well for a question and answer period. But if you do have something during the session, feel free to put it in the chat. So before I turn the mic over to Lucienne, I'm going to do a couple quick introductions. So Lucienne Fabien is a senior facilitator and coach, integral certified coach, and she works with us at Mindsmatter. She's had 25 years experience in communications, public relations, and has taught for UQAM for 15 years in the executive MBA program. So we're very happy to have her interviewing Michael today. And Michael Bunting, very happy to welcome you to the stage in Montreal, but I love that we can have you live from Australia. So as you know, he is a best-selling author, and the latest book, Vertical Growth, is done with Carl Lemieux from Mindsmatter. So we're very proud of that. Michael is a global expert on the integration of transformational leadership development, mindfulness, adult development, and culture change. Some of the things he's known for is ethics and value-based mindfulness, inner inquiry work, mindful leadership. He also is the founder of a consultancy firm called WorkSmart, which is a certified B Corp. And anybody that knows about B Corps knows that's a lot of work. So congratulations on that, Michael. He's one of the few people in the world to teach mindfulness leadership at the executive MBA level. And what I love about Michael is he really challenges leaders to walk their talk. And he's also done that for the past 23 years with his own personal mindfulness practice. And he's also developed a wonderful app called Awakened Mind. And at Mindsmatter, we are actually Michael's North American partners for the product that we're going to be talking about today, the whole Mindful Leadership 360, and as well as the application Awakened Mind. And lastly, I just say that Michael is known for being brutally honest, yet very compassionate in his approach with holding leaders fully accountable and helping them really with developing self-awareness and mindfulness practices that allow them to make profound changes in not only in their leadership, but also in their life. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Lucienne and Michael.
Thank you, Jackie.
Well, thank you, Jackie. And I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be with you, Michael, because while I was preparing for our chat today, I couldn't help thinking that 5 years ago, I was actually reading this book. You can see it's all, and after a few pages, I went, who wrote this? And 5 years later, here we are. I'm part of Mindsmatter. We're doing this webinar. I'm a facilitator for the Mindful Leader and Vertical Growth program. So, wow, what those years have gone by and done for us. And here we are, and you in the sunny Australia now, and us wintry Canada. So
it's delightful to be. I am chuckling because I remember just seeing the image of Carl there. So Carl, if you don't, maybe some people who don't know you. So when Carl started writing the book with me, he didn't have a beard. By the end of the book, he has a gray beard now. So
like you.
Yeah, exactly. Something about this book writing happens. Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. So let's dive in the subject. And you've been. Why do you believe that the work you've been doing for the past 25 years is of particular importance in 2023, and how has it evolved in your current offering?
I think I'll start off with a conversation I had with an executive last night who's just been appointed the CHRO of one of the biggest organizations in the world. And I asked him, he had taken 2 years off in his career. And I asked him, his name's Steve, and I asked him, what do you think about going into a really intense work environment again and burnout and getting burnt out? And he said, well, I've learned that it's all about self-awareness, that the company is not responsible for looking after me and making sure I have balanced hours. That's my responsibility. And it echoed a piece of research I read recently, which shows that burnout, people who burn out, not that we're talking about burnout particularly in this conversation, but it's just relevant. People who burn out often need to have a break, right? They just have to have a break. They take a break, 2 to 3 months break, sometimes up to 6 months. They get back into the workforce, and within a couple of weeks, they're back into burnout after the break. And then some people don't. They manage to sustain through and change the burnout. And the ones who change actually grow and develop self-awareness. And it's really interesting that just from a simple perspective of well-being, that growth is not, nice bit of mindfulness or a bit of holiday is not enough. We actually have to grow and take responsibility at a very deep level in order to really be well inside ourselves. And then we have a simple principle in our work. For those of you who don't know our work, we don't do meditation for leaders, which a lot of people call mindful leadership, basically is meditation for leaders. And we have an integrated leadership development model based off the world's most researched leadership theory. And then we bring in a consciousness into it. And I'd say that we are in a time on the earth where we desperately need more conscious, more connected, more planet conscious at the very minimum leadership, and doesn't see it as not enough greenwashing, as my son tells me. So I think broadly speaking, there's always been a need for healthy leadership, but right now we're in some degree at an existential crisis as a species. If we keep going the way we're going, we're not going to make it. Well, a lot of us won't make it.
So could you talk about the importance of our subject today, the 360 evaluation to support leadership development as you see it?
So this is and hopefully this is interesting for everyone. When we started our leadership development program, the Mindful Leader, which is 7 practices, we typically deliver 1 program per quarter. So every 3 months, we deliver 1 of those 7 subjects. So quarter 1 would be self-awareness, quarter 2 would be accountability, quarter 3 would be vision, and so forth. And when I happened to be watching a video from Lisa Lahey out of Harvard must have been about 4 years ago. And she was sharing that their research out of Harvard Adult Development is that it takes a person 12 to 18 months to change 1 meaningful behavior. If they have a lot of discipline, a lot of structure, a lot of process behind them, they can change 1 behavior. And based on our experience, actually that intuitively matched up with our own experience over 20 years of working with leaders, that to really meaningfully shift 1 behavior is a remarkable achievement as an adult. And so then if we accept that theory, which we did accept and have accepted and embraced, that it takes an adult 12 to 18 months to change 1 behavior. Now, those of you who've done enough awareness work or inner work will probably be chuckling inside and say, well, 12 to 18 months is even ambitious. Sometimes it's a lifetime to change 1 behavior and you still 75% succeed and there's still regression. In fact, there's new theory that's come out now called a fallback, which shows that we adults can develop a new behavior and then still regress right through our rest of our lives in moments of stress and so forth. But if we accept the theory that it takes 12 to 18 months to change a behavior, then it renders a lot of leadership development, a lot of work we do useless, because we're presenting, oh, here's a spreadsheet of like behaviors, and here's a laminate, back in the old days, here's a laminated card with tools and tips. All of that is junk. It's excess waste. It doesn't actually make a difference. And so the task for all of us in the industry is to help leaders find the right behavior change. If we accept you can only change one behavior, and that's pretty solid research behind that, then how do you find the right behavior change? And unfortunately, we find when we're in the coaching or the leadership development space, I liken the relationship of being a coach to a leader as being a coach to a tennis player, where you never actually get to see your tennis player you're coaching on the court playing. You only ever talk to them in a room, and they're telling you how they're playing, and then you kind of trying to help them. And if they're delusional about how they're playing, you've got very little chance of helping them, which we actually is quite consistent. We are all delusional. And so the 360 assessment becomes a way to get some degree of information from the people sitting in the stands watching the tennis player, and giving a somewhat structured report back on how the forehand's working, the backhand, the serve, and so forth, so that as the coach, you can get at least some degree or the objective viewpoint, but also the leader themselves can get an objective viewpoint, because, you know, one of our favorite sayings in our work is that the body always tells the truth, but the mind is a lying machine. The mind lies and lies and lies and lies. And I give the funny, recently I've been giving the funny example of when people say, what do you mean the mind lies? And it's like, you know, this is like a skit, right? It's like, I am not angry, right? Yeah. So if you say, I am not angry, it's like, hold on a second, it's freaking obvious you're angry. But in that moment, the mind is literally convincing us, you know, that we're not, or, you know, I didn't do that, or I didn't feel this way, or and it's endless, right? I don't really need to go to bed right now because I just need to watch this extra hour of Netflix, or, you know, eating this chocolate's not really that big a deal, or whatever. The mind is endlessly lying, and the body tells the truth. So, you know, I am not angry. If you had to ask that person, notice your body, notice the effect in your body. What do you know? What do you notice? You know, heat, tension. I wonder what heat and tension might be called. You know, like, oh, anger, right? You are angry, and your body's telling you you're angry. And so giving people an objective view, well, a somewhat objective, because the people viewing them have all got their own projections and so forth, but a somewhat objective view of how they're leading is really, really important. In fact, when we started the updated Mindful Leader program, we excluded the 360 as mandatory, but now we make it mandatory. It's just core to the process. And then the question comes in, you know, how do you give it an objective measurement? And the Mindful Leader 360 is built off the world's most researched leadership theory, which is Kouzes and Posner's. They measure 5 practices. There's been, I think, more than 700 doctoral and master's theses written using that model, more than any other on earth. And then we added 2 practices to their 5. So we measure 7 practices, the 5 most researched plus 2. And the plus 2 we measure accountability in a very direct way, and we measure self-awareness in a very direct way. And then that gives the leader a good sense of, we have global benchmarks. So we've measured about 20,000. We've done about 20,000 assessments in the global norm. And we measure people against those benchmarks, but we also measure something really important, which are the paradoxes. So, and this is where sometimes our clients will say, no, we want to use our own 360. And we say, well, do you measure the paradoxes? And if not, then we really do need to use our assessment. And what are the paradoxes? So research from Zenger and Folkman, who have got a very big body of research on leadership. This is one research study. Shows that leaders who they were interested in the paradigm of being a tough leader or a nice leader. So should you be tough, task-driven, demanding on your people, high standards, drive on high standards, or should you be nice, warm, connected, empathetic, appreciative, a great listener, those lovely qualities. And they found that on average, 8.9% of people who are led by a leader who over-indexes, who's just tough but not necessarily nice, they are 8.9% of them are fully engaged at work. Leaders are people who are led by a boss who over-indexes on nice, so they don't necessarily do the accountability stuff well, or the tough conversations or the driving for high performance, but they're really empathetic and mindful and lovely. 6.7% of people declare that they're fully engaged with leaders like that. So shockingly, people would, it seems the data tells us, people would prefer a tough leader to a nice leader. But then if you look at the data, it turns out that the very rare leaders that have both tough and nice, they're both tough and nice, 68% of their direct reports declare that they are fully engaged. So it's a massive leap up, and it really affirms the theory that to be a great leader, you need to be tough and nice. To be a great parent, you need to be tough and nice. To have great relationships, intimate, romantic relationships, you need good boundaries and a soft, connected heart. You know, you need this paradox of boundaries and kindness is fundamental to flourishing of human relationships and performance. And we measure that in a very direct way on our 360 to give that person an objective snapshot, a collection of behaviors that are tough and necessary for leadership, a collection of behaviors that are nice. And most people are imbalanced. And the reason they're imbalanced is because, thanks to our childhoods, thanks to our cultural conditioning, but also it takes deep awareness to embrace both. Because most of us create an identity out of being tough or out of being nice. And the paradox of being tough and nice is confusing for the mind and the personality identity. And it's only when you become to be more identified with presence itself, awareness itself, that the paradox is easily embraced and makes sense. But that takes a lot of conscious work. So I know I'm giving you a roundabout answer, but that's very connected to the 360. And we would say that's arguably the most important measurement. Are you balanced in the paradox, and what work do you need to do to become balanced?
So in your book, The Mindful Leader, of course, you talk about the 7 key areas of leadership, and you briefly named them. Could you provide us with an overview? And the other question I had as well is that, okay, you know, you go in, you do this 360, but, you know, when you want to change a behavior, you need to be sure to have those rituals. So how does the leader, after you're gone, keep up the work?
Yeah. So the 7, I'll start with the 7 and then ask the 2 questions. So for everybody, quick overview is, maybe I'll just ask everybody, because it'll help you be more engaged, is if you think of the best boss you've ever had, or a leader that you know, don't think of a famous person unless you know that famous person. And you think to yourself, what are the qualities or habits or behaviors that made that person such a great leader, or make that person such a great leader? You just think about that for a second and just name 1 or 2 things that really makes that person a great leader. Equally, you could think, have you ever had a terrible boss or a terrible leader in your life? And you think, what makes that person not great? What exactly do they do? So we typically ask that question when we do our programs, and people write it down, and we do this debrief, which is rather interesting. And a couple of interesting things that come out. One, it's never about intelligence. We've never ever said anyone. So what made them a great leader was they were so smart. Never. We've never seen that. Because it turns out a lot of very smart people are really bad leaders, right? So, and a lot of people who are not brilliantly smart can be fantastic leaders. So then what is it, right, that makes a person a great leader? And Kuzis and Posner, their research out of 30 years ago, and I'll tell you the first 5 and then the 7, they say, well, great. It turns out when leaders are getting exceptional results and highly engaging people, and people love working for that leader, would net promotes, them. They are leaders who, number one, lead from mindful values. So they have a very clear talk to walk. Now, it's in our experience that about 1% of leaders we meet can express a talk that they walk. We have this funny thing we do in our presentations. We go, do leaders need to walk the talk? And everybody goes, yes. Great. Turn to the person next to you and describe the talk you're trying to walk each day as a leader. And everybody goes blank. And isn't that interesting, right? So the first thing they do is they have a talk to walk that they walk. The second thing they do really well is have a vision, a sense of purpose. Kuza Symposium's research tells us the first things, when people get a new boss, the first two things they want to know is, who are you and where you're taking us? In other words, what do you stand for and what's your vision? And the third practice is leaders cultivate a beginner's mind or challenge the process. So they are pioneering in spirit. If you're not pioneering, you're not leading, you're following. So leadership by definition is innovation. It's new, it's pushing the envelope, it's experimenting, it's growing. It's helping others learn, it's creating learning environments. Then fourth, leadership's empowerment. So what we call empower others to shine. At its essence, leadership is about lifting others up over yourself, which is an extreme act of psychological confidence. I think it's really hard to actually bring yourself to go, I've got these direct reports and I'm going to make them better than me. And I want to make sure one of them at least outshines me and can take my job. I mean, that's the epitome of great leadership too. And then encourage the heart or engage the heart is so important as well. And we know that 79% of people who leave their jobs cite as one of their top 5 reasons for leaving the job that they did not get enough appreciation at work. And so the whole process of appreciation, both for performance reasons as well as human reasons, is really important. So that's the 5. And then in our work, because we do transformational work over time, we found that the subject of 200% accountability is the 6th one we added. We typically teach it 2nd. So leaders typically and human beings have a viewpoint that when they've got challenges and problems, it's everybody else's fault. So one of the sort of jokes I say to people is, if you meet someone whose marriage is not going well, I say they're married and it's not going so great, and you say like, hey, what's going on in your marriage that's not so good? How many of us would say, oh, well, it's me, it's my unresolved patterns of behavior, and I need to work on my poor partner that has to live with me. I'm really working hard. People don't say things like that.
No.
Like it's my partner, this, and they can't do this, and they're just selfish this. And so we have a default tendency to blame others for our problems, or blame the world, or blame COVID, or blame anything, but other than ourselves. And if we can't radically own our own behavior and our own choices, we invariably cannot grow. Simple as that. We cannot grow. If we cannot grow as a leader, we're stuck. And the other piece is holding other people to account. We actually measured that holding other people to account actually creates healthy engagement and happier, mentally healthier teams. So the whole interesting thing of being nice, but not necessarily holding people to account for performance and behaviors, is actually damaging to people's mental health. It's such a paradox. So accountability is really, really important as a leader, taking it and holding others to account. And then the last one, the 7th one, is awareness, self-awareness, or what we as you know, we go towards self-regulation, because we always say self-awareness is useless without self-regulation. I may know that I can swear a lot, I'm self-aware, but then I keep swearing. So what? I need to be able to interrupt that habit of behavior and regulate. And then that's also funny, because we often ask in our keynote talks, we put the timer on and we say, can everybody be self-aware for the next 30 seconds, please? Putting the timer on, we start. And what most happens is most people sit there blank and confused. How do you do self-awareness for 30 seconds? And it reveals a desperate gap in our education. And most of the time we're working with incredibly educated, smart people, and they don't know how to practice self-awareness. Now, of course, how can you change a behavior without self-awareness. It's really, really hard, if not impossible, and slow and messy, way more slow and messy. So that's the 7th practice. But also, like, it's also not just self-awareness, it's being aware. So that expression when you meet a great leader, that you feel like you're the only person in the world when they're with you. That's that awareness, that presence. And then how do you get a person to change over time? You don't. It's like, what's that psychologist question? How do you get a person to change a light bulb? First thing is they've got to want to change the light bulb. Right? So I think in our work, we've been asked this question. I've been asked this question about 3 times in the last 2 days from new clients going, well, how do we guarantee we get people to really change? And my first question, you can take there's multiple theories on change, right? But if we take 3 bodies of work, adult development theory, then trauma theory, and then behavior science, we take those 3 disciplines and we go, how do people change? How do you get change? The first thing we'd say is that from adult development theory perspective, we only change when the pain of staying the same is higher than the pain of change. Right. So, and unfortunately for many of us, we're in a lot of pain, but we've got such sophisticated defense and denial and numbing mechanisms that we're like kind of, weirdly enough, we think we're not creating pain or we're in pain, but we are, because we're actually deeply dissatisfied. There's a numbing, gnawing emptiness in the system, which is significant of all that numbing that we've been doing. So part of seeing that is waking people up to the actual reality of their behavior. It's like taking the blue pill in the Matrix, or the red pill, whichever one it was. So that's the first thing. Now, so I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I spoke to a brand new client who's a country head of a multinational company here in Australia. And she asked me this question. She said, how do I ensure my whole executive team really go on this journey? And I said, my answer was, I said, well, how prepared are you to fire people who don't go on the journey? And so she eventually said, no, I'm willing to, and I have fired people who don't. Now, you can't mandate as an organization for people to take on deeper awareness work. That's ridiculous. What you can mandate is key behaviors that matter for the organization's engagement and performance, actual performance of the business. Once you've mandated those, then you can support people who are not fully role modeling those behaviors. And you can say, look, you need to start role modeling these behaviors, otherwise it's game over. That creates a fair degree of pain of staying the same, which then can funnily enough be an extrinsic motivator for change. And I know that a lot of people would disagree with that, but we've found that we think intrinsic and extrinsic motivation are both important. Sometimes, getting cancer, which is like a thing that happens to you, you didn't can be a life-changing experience. I would say that's an extrinsic motivator, not an intrinsic motivator. It's something that happened to you, and you go, whoa, hold on. And so we believe that organizations need to set clarity around how important is this change and what are the consequences if you do or don't succeed. And then the second element of change is intrinsic motivation. So I don't believe change is sustainable if it's purely extrinsic motivation. And this is why in our work, we help people explore what it is that they really stand for as a human being and who it is that they really want to be in a conscious way. Once that's clarified for a person, it usually becomes a stark reality. You can quickly start seeing how your existing behaviors are actually, some of them are out of sync or out of whack with your deepest intentions and values as a human being. That's the intrinsic motivation point. And then lastly, if you look at behavior science, and you indicated this, is one needs rituals. One needs regular repetition or prompts. This is basic BJ Fogg. And so in our work, we have a check-in system. So we use a 360 check-in on our app. So literally we rate the leaders every 2 weeks on their behavior. They get a pulse check rating. How's this leader doing on their behavior change commitment? It graphs it so the leader can see either they're progressing or going backwards, falls into the progress principle. If you remember, that's a really important part of growing and changing. And then we also create an organizational ritual where at least once a month, the group come together, they have to show their graph for progress, they have to describe failures, learnings, and we've got a very structured process for that, so that there's momentum over time of integrating, but also creating a safe space, and that's the trauma theory, a safe space for learning and growing, because growing and learning by default is messy and trial and error and difficult. And so if we don't have a safe space where we can talk about the process and learning, the paradox of safety and accountability. I remember I talked about paradoxes at the beginning of the chat. The paradoxes are really so fundamental to get for this deeper development work. Then we get shift and change. If we've got all those conditions in place, we would say it's about, our strike rate would be about 7.5 to 8 out of 10 people will change. 2 to 2.5 people just they're just too traumatized, too deeply conditioned, too set. They just can't do it. They just don't want to do it, can't do it. It's too much for them. And you might argue that those people really need deep therapy work, which they probably would be the last people to choose it anyway. But then we would say that's not really the organization's responsibility.
Thank you so much for that. Of course, we have to talk about your new book that you wrote with Carl that grew a beard. I don't know you just mentioned that, and now I'm worried. I'm worried. So this is such a book that has the continued flavor of the mindful leader. And I was wondering, what's the difference, of course, between horizontal and vertical development, and how does the 360 fit in?
So the traditional response to when we see a gap in a leader's, let's take a leadership, because it could be anything in life, a leader's skill set. The traditional response is if a leader is not doing something, let's say empowering people, it's because they don't understand how, or they're not giving feedback to people regularly. It's because they don't know how to give feedback, right? So the traditional approach is give them the skills. So put them on a training program, give them a book. In other words, the idea that if you give them information on how to do that skill, then by default, it's our school education model. You know what I mean? Like it's our school education model is constantly adding new knowledge and information, which then is assumed sometimes to create transformation. Now we know that doesn't work. And you know statistically, even for example, in medicine, that 50% of people comply with their medication, their medication prescription, like how much time they're supposed to take the medication. And some people don't even take their medication, which becomes life-threatening and even like life-ending. Right? So we have this very, there's more at play to change and growth than we realize. And there's two primary things. The first is that there's usually there's always unconscious investment in the old behavior. So for example, and I'll use a really easy example. Let's say you've got a micromanaging leader, you give them empowerment skills, training, and amazingly enough, nothing changes. The reason why is not, so then we conclude either that person's useless or the training was terrible, typically one or both. We blame somebody. What we found is that actually for that, I'll just imagine this person, that actually usually micromanagement comes with over control. It's control issues. Control is led by fear, right? So, and then there's deep ideation and ideas around if I empower, there's deep fears. What will happen if I empower? And the person might, if we've got a structured process for that, they might say, well, if I really empower my people, I'll become irrelevant. Now, if you're going to become irrelevant, if you empower people, then why would you ever empower people? Who wants to be irrelevant? And so most of us have got deep unconscious belief systems and emotional fears they are the things that are actually preventing us from growth and change. Vertical growth is the process, the structured process for looking at those patterns and fears inside ourselves in the context of a horizontal skill. So in our program, we present, here's what you need to develop. And here's how. Here's the horizontal skill. So here's empowerment. Good. There's a 3-step process for empowerment, which I often jokingly tell our clients, we can teach you in 5 minutes how to empower people. That's easy. Just do this, this, and this. How do you teach a person to walk the talk, right? Oh, that's easy. Define a talk and begin to walk it. Not rocket science, but not easy to do, right? So we find that there's really deep, so being able to give people the skills to look within, take accountability for what they're seeing, and then manage the emotional distress that comes with that. If you get those 3 right, and then you also have that's the looking down, vertical, down, and then you also have a consciousness of who am I wanting to be, who am I really deeply intrinsically trying to be, which is the looking up. That's the process of vertical growth. And in simple terms, it's being able to see your patterns, not ruled by your patterns. And we also use vertical growth for whole organization change. By illustration, recently a European client of ours declared deep frustration. They had created new values and behaviors, and they wanted to do an organizational transformation. A year down the line, they weren't seeing much transformation. And they said, look, we've published the values, we've talked about the behaviors, we've done multiple webinars on these new behaviors, and we're just not seeing the change. That's because there's a bunch of old behaviors that have deep investment and fears around them that no one wants to talk about. Because we just want to, we just want to talk about pretty. We don't want to look at what's really going on. Vertical growth is also that process. It's deeply looking at the current reality and objectively unpacking it so that I can no longer be ruled by the dysfunctional elements of my current reality. So it's that person who's trying to empower people is looking at the fears, looking at the beliefs that are driving their micromanaging, and then beginning to get 2 things. We know from adult development theory that the number one and only, according to recent PhD research, the only thing that determines whether a person grows or not is their relationship with their emotional world. So, and I'll just cite the research to everybody. We had a friend of mine who's becoming a friend, Alison Agnostakis. She did a PhD research study on leadership, on a 6-month leadership program run by another organization. And she measured adult development, which you can measure pretty accurately nowadays. And she found that a huge portion of the group over the 6-month leadership program became less mature. They literally regressed in maturity. And then some stayed the same. They did not progress at all in adult development maturity. And then some improved. And she became very curious in her research of what determines whether you stay stuck, go backwards, or improve. And the only thing that she could find was it's your relationship with your feelings and your emotional world. So when you repress, so for example, the micromanager, they can't actually cope with the fear and anxiety that comes with letting go of control and confronting standards. They can't cope with that emotionally. So they go back to the default pattern of micromanagement. And then you get very frustrated with these people because they're not progressing. The progression is all about how you work with your emotional world. This was beautifully summed up by Stephen Barrett, who's in the book. And I spoke with Stephen last night, actually. And Stephen said to me that, yeah, pretty much all the poor decisions he's made in his life, 90% of them, 10% is just luck. You never know in hindsight. But 90% of the poor decisions he's made have been emotional avoidance based. So he didn't fire someone in time. He didn't give someone honest feedback. He didn't exit himself fast enough. He didn't make the right selection on the right promotion, so forth. It was all about him trying to find a way not to feel. And he said all the while he prided himself on being a very rational leader. Totally irrational, because he had found sophisticated ways to run away from confronting feelings. And so that's also an element of vertical growth. It's developing a completely different, mindful relationship with our emotional world.
That's a big work with leadership. I was wondering if you have started to see tangibly in some organization, because this just came out, but I know that you've been working on that on several companies. What kind of results do you see tangibly? It's because making the link between our attitude and behaviors, everybody knows it's important, but with this kind of work with tangible business results, what can you speak a little bit about it?
Yeah, so the first program we properly measured. We've measured one, and we've got a bunch of at the moment because we upgraded the program. So we've just done this massive upgrade. That's why I look so tired. And we found we were interested in measuring image management. So if any of you on the call who don't know this, that image management is what we call most people's second job in particularly large, but even small organizations, where it's like, showing up and pretending you know stuff, or hiding weaknesses, or showing up at meetings that you don't really need to be in, but you want to be there just in case so people can see you. It's being political. It's not being values-based. It's kissing upwards and kicking downwards, a whole range of behaviors that broadly fit into image management. And our clients have told us that they believe 40%, this is our research, 40% of their time and energy is wasted on image management, which is an astonishing amount of waste in an organization. And so we were curious to measure that in a way of, well, can our program reduce image management? Because gee whiz, if you had an organization of 5,000 people, and you could release 20% of the energy of that 5%, take it away out of image management and release it into innovation, into honest conversations, into collaboration, and so forth. Wow, that would be good. And the measurement we did is we found a 31% improvement, or reduction, if you will, on image management in the space of about 5 months, which now we haven't re-measured like the trail through, because we've got trail through processes too. So we'll see, but that's what it's initially telling us, that we actually are successfully reducing image management. And then probably my favorite moment of all with that same client was that I entered at a keynote talk in Malaysia, and multiple people came up, and this is not a business thing. They said, oh my God, this program's changed my life. I'd never met these people, because we had actually created a digital version of the program that they were able to roll out internally. And just meeting people that's lives have changed as a result of your program that you've never actually met. It's a wonderful one. So we're now also seeing, not only are we seeing the measured impact, we're also seeing the proof of scalability. With internal coaches or external partners, it doesn't matter. The process delivers a great result. Now, we would think that our new program, the new version, which we're just releasing, we literally in the final parts of that, of finalizing that program when we launched it, and we've launched it knowing by the time our clients get to module 4, we will have done it. We haven't even done module 4 yet. That program, I would say, would be twice as effective as the old program. It's my guess. So we should see we could see up to 50% reduction in image management, which is also an increase. When you reduce image management, you increase integrity and honesty, increase psychological safety, you increase innovation and growth mindset. So that's the kind of counter measurement that we're measuring. Now, in terms of business impact, one thing I should mention, I've just remembered now, we had a chat with a new client, or relatively new client, who had one division in their business. So we started the Mindful Leader. It's a global organization, and one of their divisions really went for it. Like, they actually way ahead of everybody else. This is in South America, their South American division. And the CEO shared with us, they started the program in June last year. That division was loss-making quite seriously. And then the program really got going through October, November, December. And as of now, they're now a profitable division. And they attributed that change to the culture change to our program, which is remarkable. So we've literally seen a business turnaround at scale, quite big business turnaround happen in the last couple of months because the discipline that we're bringing in now is directly linking behavior to performance, to business outcomes. It's part of the way we do which is a new part of the program.
So we have time for a few questions. If people want to ask Michael some questions, I know that we have friends from Australia as well. And Carl has the first question. Hey, you raise your hand, Carl.
I didn't necessarily need to be first, but again, thank you so much, Michael, for being here. Love seeing Lucianne taking this conversation away as well. Questions for you, Michael, given, I'm realizing I'm freezing up.
You are, but we can hear you.
Okay, so I'll keep asking a question. You started rolling this out, and you've been doing this for a while with that same boldness. We're going further with this kind of program. As you're saying, we're starting to go into what we're calling the shadow work. We're starting to go into deeper emotional connection with people and getting them to connect with a deeper emotional element side to them. How have your clients been reacting to that? Because a lot of people may say, that's out of our realm. That belongs to individual. That's more the domain of counseling and psychology than of coaching and organizational preoccupations. What are you seeing as you roll this out in terms of reception and openness to going deeper on development and self-awareness?
So Carl, the first thing, again, the context is so crucial. If the organization's clear on the behavior change it needs and wants, it sets a platform. If it doesn't, it's harder to convince anyone to actually just randomly go and look at this stuff. So context is important. We've found really important. And then what we've done in the work is, you're exactly right. If the game is behavior change, which it is in terms of culture, anything, we would say if you don't know how to change a behavior, all your culture change efforts are a complete and absolute waste of time, which is what the vast majority of clients do. They publish posters until they're blue in the face and pretty internal marketing campaigns. Yay, let's a new culture. And then nothing really changes. Where's the borderline between therapy and actual change work? And we've been extremely careful with this. So what we do particularly in the new program, we've done this even more. We're very interested in examining the defense mechanisms, not necessarily the deeper conditioned origins of the defense mechanisms. So let me give you an easy example. In one of our parts of our program, we get people to look at when they get feedback, what's their default response to the feedback, and most people it's defense. And then we give them really clear guidelines on how exactly those defense mechanisms operate. What's happening now is we're getting them to become very aware, third foundation of mindfulness, of the thinking patterns, of the body sensations, but we are not in a therapeutic context at all. But we're still in enough getting really deep at this point. They're starting to examine thought patterns, emotional patterns, without talking about their childhood at all. And then the second element we introduce is what we call the 3 poisons. For those of you who don't know, this is the second foundation of mindfulness. It's our conditioned response to pleasant and unpleasant and neutral experiences. Our conditioned responses are fear, greed, and numbing. And so we look at those 3 responses and we dive deeper into those 3 responses, which gives a universal framework to look at some quite deep content that doesn't again become personal. It's less, because we all do those 3 things. And so we have a very strict guardrail that we follow, where we give permission to people to talk about quite deep things, but in a way that feels like, oh, we will all do this. It's not like, oh, this is my unique story. And we've never, ever, ever, never in all of our 20 years had any event or adverse event or difficulty or complaints. Never. This has never happened. And so we, and we've pushed the envelope and tested and pushed the envelope. And so we found a way without going into great detail, because the problem is if you don't do that deep awareness work, you're stuck again. You're just stuck, because that deep awareness work, you've got to, we have this expression in our work called, that which you cannot name and describe will always keep ruling you while you don't even know. If you cannot name it and describe it, you cannot overcome it. It's impossible. Now, you don't have to name your childhood story, but you do have to name the physical and emotional sensations and habits that are driving you in your adult life, if that makes sense. Name being able to see.
Michael, thank you. But I do want to ask the question. My experience in working with any organizations, large publicly traded, multinational, small, nothing changes. And I think your point you said earlier, it's the pain of staying the same has to be greater than the pain of change. Otherwise, there's no change. And large organizations, my experience has been, it's not just that greater than, it's almost crisis. There has to be a significant crisis, like almost near death. And then people start to, I'm exaggerating the point, but people start to change in the organization. The organization starts to change. I can't imagine it's much different. And I'm thinking of myself, I cope really well. I've learned to cope really well. I'm not even sure if I could even measure greater than. So I'm kind of wondering, at what point do you in your experience start to see with leaders that tipping point where they finally get it? That they're like, how much pain does that have to be greater than before there's change?
Yes, it's a great question. And in the spirit of real honesty, we have achieved that scale change at a regional level, and like radical change, right? Where, one of our clients went from the reputation of the worst culture of their global network, and they eventually won an award on their culture, right? 3 years later. So we've seen dramatic, incredible change at the level of 1,000 to 2,000 people. And then what we found when we go up to the global level, which we've done a few times too, now we're dealing with 100,000 people, and we're now closer to the stock market, is another way of saying it. We're closer to that publicly traded. Our experiences we've seen is we see pockets of change we've not seen. I think in some way, we as a species are still struggling with this, as Stephen said to me last night, it was the CHRO of one of these giant companies that we did a giant transformation for, and we still remain deep friends with all of these people as they've moved on. So, the quality of the relationship stays, but did we succeed to change the whole culture? We succeeded to change big pockets of the culture, but I think still the idea of compassion and consciousness and in deep integrity work, I think the stock market is not ready for it yet, to be honest. I think there's a tension point, but I think that as we do this work, it becomes more and more like we're making a slight dent into the journey where eventually it'll become, I think 100 years from now, one of my own mentors said, Michael, your timeline's too tight. Just keep doing the work, and you're making, drop by drop, and maybe 100 years from now, they'll look at how corporations were just financial centric only, and everything else was window dressing, and be horrified that we could have run organizations like that. But if we don't keep doing the consciousness work we're doing, I don't think we ever get that. We have to do the change work and release. So that's my it's yet to be seen, yet to be seen if we can get this, at least in our little world, the tension between the monster that is the stock market, the psychopath, if you will, that is the stock market running the show and trying to bring in, because at some level they are deeply, deeply at odds with each other.
Thank you.
We know theoretically they're not, but in the reality of the experience, they are.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. It was a thrill to have you. And I was really very grateful that Carl accepted that I was to be the host for today, the moderator. So thank you so much.
Lucian, I just really want to answer one short question.
Yeah, go.
Julian's question.
Yes. Please
We
do.
need to sell this to management, right? I don't have time to show you the slides, but the most important thing is helping a management team understand what behaviors in the business, if it's a business, what behaviors in the business at the moment support our ability to execute on our strategy and our vision, and what behaviors in the business at the moment detract or disable our ability to successfully and easily execute and collaborate and innovate on the strategy and the vision. If you get in the leadership team to answer that question, you're now halfway there. Because if they can articulate the behavior that's not working for the organization and the behavior that they need to be a more successful financial business, at that point, then the next logical question is, okay, well, how do we begin to eliminate those destructive behaviors and have more of the constructive behaviors? That question then becomes, and what in our work we call it the 3 R's. You need a role modeling of leaders, you need rituals, and you need the rewards and accountability systems to be looked at. And the interesting thing is, and this isn't, if you're feeling brave and you have a challenging conversation with the management board or the management team, you say, well, if those behaviors that you've been brave enough to mention are really not working for our business, there's no possible way that you would have succeeded and been in a senior management position if you did not role model some of those bad behaviors. If you did all the good behaviors, you would never have got promotion to this level. Clearly, those behaviors are some of the way we do things. So therefore, we need to see a transformation in you, the senior management team, to go from those red zone, being able to name your own red zone behaviors, or what you call red zone, and move into green zone behaviors. And if you can see that role model, you will have a more successful business because you've already articulated it. You've already said, well, those are the behaviors we need more of to be more efficient, more innovative, and more successful. Okay, good. It starts with the role modeling. That's how we present it now. And then we even give management teams slide decks to present back to their teams around how the organizational journey needs to go from a perspective of culture to performance, and what their personal journey is, their own journey around moving from difficult behaviors that they do into healthy behaviors. And then there's an invitation for everybody to take the journey together. That's the process we do to convince.
And just to say, if anybody would need help with that, we are there for the whole Mindsmatter team can help you bring these points up with senior management to help get the program into your organization. Thank you so much, everyone. I shared in the chat the link for our next Breakfast and Learn event. We would love to see you there. It's with Jocelyn Dubuc from the Spa Eastman, who is a very ambitious woman with her spa has been really innovating, and they've received a lot of awards over the years. So we're really looking forward to that. But Michael, thank you so much for having some great comments, very enriching discussion, and looking forward to bringing this 360 assessment and the program to lots of companies in North America. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Lucienne. Thank you, Carl. And thank you, everybody. Lovely to see you and some familiar faces.
Yes, thank you so much.
Ciao. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Have a great day, Michael.